بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله السلام الله عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته to everyone. I want to welcome you to another conversation that we have in conversation today with Dr. Bara Zuhaili. This is a timely conversation because all of our hearts are being broken right now as we're seeing what's happening in Gaza. We thought that maybe there was going to be a ceasefire. We thought that maybe the genocide was going to stop. And then the Israeli forces started again, and now they've entered into Rafah, and they've taken over the corridor between Gaza and Egypt. And we have with us someone who is actually in Gaza, someone who went as a medical doctor to help the people of Gaza and experienced and saw things that we wanted to discuss here today. Dr. Bara, assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for having me.
MashaAllah. First of all, for everyone out there that's listening, Dr. Bara is a very close friend, and he's someone who, by Allah's mercy, he took care of my father during his latter years of life.
SubhanAllah.
Dr. Bara has a big place in my heart, in my family's
Allah
heart.
yarhamah.
So we thank you so much, Dr. Bara, for taking care of Dad. Rahmatullahi alayhi.
Allah yarhamah. Allah yarhamah wa ya'alli ma'ama bil jannah inshallah.
Ameen. So, Dr. Bara, I want to start by just putting everything in perspective. If you can tell us what sort of medicine you practice and a little bit of your background.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa afdal as-salat wa atammu taslim. So, ideally, I will shy away from answering this question just because I want this conversation to be about Gaza and Gaza only. But I think it is relevant in this case, and I will give you due disclaimer. It is relevant to identify who am I, what's my background, to put things on perspective. So while I usually shy away from answering those questions, but I think in this case I have to, and I will go into more details than what I usually do. So I am a vascular surgeon by training and by practice. I have been in practice for about 8 years. I was where I met you in Baltimore. I was at Johns Hopkins as an assistant professor in vascular surgery. I was the chief of vascular at Howard County Hospital. And then we moved with the pandemic, with the COVID pandemic, where everything shut down. We moved to Flint, Michigan to be close to family. So that's how I left Hopkins. But I also have strong background in public health. And that's where things become relevant in this case. And I will make my two disclaimer in a minute. So I've done a lot of projects related to public health as it relates to conflict zones. Unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know which one it is, I am not new to conflict. I've been to Syria, northwest Syria, multiple times. I've done some public health projects in Uganda. I was, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately again, I was in Turkey in Gaziantep, which is the epicenter of the earthquake that happens in February 6th last year. I was physically in Gaziantep, and subhanAllah, I escaped death by a matter of few seconds only when my hotel collapsed. So I'm not new to all of this. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I've seen my share of this. The reason why I'm explaining all of this, when I explain what's going on in Gaza, you will see that I'm explaining in a lot of details things that might be appalling to everyone. But what's more scary is it's even more appalling for me, the person who've seen all those disasters, who've seen all those atrocities. I thought I've seen it all. I thought what I saw in northwest Syria during the Syrian conflict, when the Syrian regime was dropping bombardment and whatnot, I thought I've seen it all. I thought nothing will faze me anymore. I thought nothing will break me anymore. But I was wrong. And again, that becomes relevant to explain the magnitude of what I saw in Gaza. So that's the first disclaimer. The second disclaimer, because of my background in public health, I usually try to stay away from emotions. I'm someone who focuses on numbers. So like my last trip to Uganda in November, they had a big disaster there, not related to conflict, related to some infectious disease. And the minute I arrived, they start telling me all those emotional stories. And my attitude has always been, I don't want to hear any emotional stories. I don't want to hear anything. Let's focus on the numbers. Tell me how many hospitals you need. Tell me how many nurses, how many doctors you need, and let's move on. That's it. And that has been my attitude to establish good public health practice on the ground. And obviously, that doesn't always bring me a lot of friends, but in my mind, like, hey, inshallah, as long as I'm getting the work done, that's what I'm going to do. Now, when it comes to Gaza, I think I'm going to break that habit because the situation is so disastrous, is so bad that I don't think numbers can give it justice. So when we hear 34,000 people died, that's a really big number, but I don't think it even come close to what's going on the ground. So I think I'm gonna break from my own habit and from my own rule, and I am gonna get some personal stories of things that I saw in Gaza, and I think that will help, hopefully, the audience understand the magnitude of what's going on in Gaza right now.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Baraa, as we're going through this interview, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want you to reform those questions in a way that you think they would be better asked, so that you can get at really the crux of the matter that we really need to get to in this situation. So, you've seen a lot of pain, you've seen a lot of suffering throughout your whole life, and you're coming and you're saying what you saw in Gaza goes beyond anything that you've experienced in these other places. So, I want to start with your background. How did you even have this opportunity to get to Gaza? I think it's important for us to sort of lay the foundational framework until you enter into Gaza. So, how did this opportunity even come up? Because what we're hearing, from the outside is that the Israelis have everything closed up and you can't even get in.
Yes and no. They have a lot of restrictions on allowing people to come in, but at the end of the day, they allow certain number of people to go each month. So subhanallah, yani, you want to call it luck, tawfiq min Allah, Allah subhanallah chosen, or whatever you want to call it. Subhanallah, from the beginning, from October 8th, I start looking online to see who can take me. And I have a lot of friends in Jordan who subhanallah, without any coordination with any organization, with anyone, they backed up their stuff. They took vacation from their job with unknown end, and they flew from Amman to Jordan, from Amman to Qahira, and then from Qahira they spent anything from, depending on which group it is, from 1 week to 2 weeks trying to go to Gaza, and unfortunately they wouldn't let them, and that was as early as October 20. So as early as October 20, there was some really, really good-hearted people without any organization, without any, subhanallah, support from any government or anything. On their own, they flew to Qahira, and then from Qahira, they tried to go in. They were not successful. So I was in touch with those group of people from the beginning saying, if you can get in, you drag me with you, and we had that agreement. And subhanallah, it didn't work. So we kept trying and trying. And subhanallah, the opportunity came through a small organization here in Michigan called Rahma Organization, Rahma Worldwide. And I know some people through my previous work in public health, and I heard that they managed to get the first mission. The first mission went in around early January, and I immediately called them and said, "Hey, listen, I need to be there, and I don't care how long does it take. I don't care about all the details. I need to be there because, alhamdulillah, I think I can offer something they need, which is I'm a trauma surgeon and I'm a vascular surgeon. So, alhamdulillah, through Rahma Organization, they managed and they gave me the opportunity to go in there. It wasn't easy process. Anyone who want to go to Gaza has to get clearance from 3 entities: from the Egyptian government, from the Gazan government, and from the IDF, from Israel. As you can imagine, the one from the IDF is the most challenging one. But alhamdulillah, I got it. So I got the clearance from all those 3 entities. And then we flew to Al-Qahira. We spent 1 night there. And then at 5 a.m. the next day, we start the trip to Gaza. The trip to Gaza, ideally, like distance-wise, if you were to be here in the US, should take about 3.5 to 4 hours. It took us 13 hours to arrive. Multiple security checkpoints, multiple random investigation, checking the luggage again and again and again. And it's really sad that we were almost treated as if we were criminal to a certain degree. I don't blame the people who were doing this to us, the Egyptian security guard and whatnot. Wallahi, you can tell that they were doing that not wanting to do that. Clearly, they were forced to do it. So clearly, it was obvious that there was some kind of instructions to make it as difficult as possible, unfortunately. And I could be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, but that's how I felt. A trip that should take 4 hours took us 13 hours. When we arrived to Ma'bar Rafah, the Rafah crossing point, which unfortunately the Israeli took over earlier today,
Yeah.
We arrived around 5:30 p.m. and it's starting to become dark. And they wouldn't let us in. They said, no, you arrived too late. You have to go back. We negotiated for about 2-3 hours. They wouldn't let us. So we went to Al Arish, which is about 1 hour away from Rafah. And then we spent the night. Then we came the next day. Alhamdulillah, we managed to get in. I myself, I was in Deir al-Balah, which is, if you know the geography of Gaza, you have Gaza city, Khan Yunis in the middle, and then Deir al-Balah is in between. So I was between Gaza and Deir al-Balah, Gaza and Khan Yunis. The hospital is called Shuhada al-Aqsa, the Martyrs of al-Aqsa. It's really sad. That hospital is meant to be OBGYN hospital. This hospital is for delivering babies, and that's all they can do usually. But subhanAllah, with the time of the war, with Shifa and Nasser hospital completely destroyed, they stepped up their game and they managed to function as a trauma hospital. So that's where I was for the 2 weeks period.
Incredible. So Dr. Baraa, walk us through. You cross over from Egypt. Now you're in Gaza. You enter into Gaza. Are you on your own now as a group of doctors, just knowing that you need to get to this hospital, or is there someone that's there, taking you along your way?
So we were a group of 20 people, about 6 or 7 from the US, 6 or 7 from Europe, and 7 to 8 from Jordan. We all met in Cairo. We went in. We were 18 brothers and 2 sisters, 19 doctors and 1 nurse. When we crossed, there were someone from the Ministry of Health welcoming us.
Okay.
And remind me later to tell you, there was a specific story that happened with one of the people of the Ministry of Health. That was a very touching story. We'll talk about it later. But there was a gentleman, or a doctor actually, from the Ministry of Health who welcomed us. They took us to the European hospital. Anytime we go through anytime we make any movement inside Gaza, we had to give our coordination to the IDF to make sure they don't target our car. So we had to be in a specific car, specific microbus that took us from Ma'bar Rafah to the European hospital, where we split there. So some of us stayed at the European hospital. I went up to Deir al-Balah, to Mashfa Shuhada al-Aqsa.
Okay, so walk us through this process, Dr. Baraa. You enter into Gaza, and what are you seeing? What are you experiencing?
So, subhanallah, and I'm going to tell you a specific story. So I was full of emotions when going in,
and I want you to take your time and just, this is for you. You give us what you have.
Yeah. The minute, so I've never been inside something that says Palestine before. So I've been before into Jerusalem, into Al-Quds al-Sharif, Quds al-Muhtal, the occupied Jerusalem. But subhanallah, you can feel it from the first moment you are under occupation. You are going through Israeli checkpoint, they're checking you, they're giving you dirty look and whatnot. I've never in my life saw the word Dawlat Palestine, the state of Palestine, which was incredibly strong. For the first time in my life, I'm giving my passport to the checkpoint, and he stamped on my passport, and it's a badge of honor I have. On my passport, it says, "Welcome, State of Palestine," in English and in Arabic. So that by itself, just having the word Dawlat Palestine, that was extremely moving. And then as I'm going in, I'm waiting for the luggage to go in. Sami Zahabna, you know Imam Sami.
Of course, we know and we love him.
We love him. He's from Gaza. So anyone who's from Gaza, from my circle, I asked them if they need anything. I told them I'm going. My trip was secret for everyone, except for those close friends that are from Gaza. I thought I owe it to them to tell them that I'm going to Gaza. So if they need to send anything and whatnot. And subhanAllah, everyone said, maybe do that to my relative, do that, give this, give that. With one exception, Sami Zaharna, he said, "Bawusli Trab Gaza." He said, "Just kiss the ground, the soul of Gaza for me." That was his only request. So I wanted to honor his request. So the minute I walked in, obviously that was the only safe place in Gaza, because we're at the crossing point. So I didn't know whether I will make it beyond that or not. So I want to honor his request from the minute I walked in case something happens to me. At least I can fulfill a request from dear friend who's Sami Zaharna. So I pulled my phone and I wanted to videotape as I'm kissing the ground in Gaza.
Oh,
And I just couldn't. And every time I do it, as I'm saying, and I can send you the video, but every time I would say, Assalamu alaikum ya Ard Gaza, there is a greeting, there is a salam from your son, Sami Zaharna. And then I wanted to bend down to kiss the ground. I will break in tears. And then I will delete the video. I will stand up, do it again. So I kept doing this, and clearly I was visibly emotional. And every time it gets worse, I'm even tearing even more. But I want to do it because that's the only request. Sami has never asked me for anything during our friendship. This is the only time he asked me for something. So I really want to honor his request. So I kept trying. Salam alaikum ya Ard Gaza. This is salam from your son, Sami Zaharna. He asked me to do this. And so I'm doing this, and eventually I did it. Eventually I managed to do a video where I'm saying the salam to Ard Gaza, and I'm kissing the ground, and I'm not tearing down. But in the process, you can tell that I was tearing, I was emotional. The doctor who from the Ministry of Health saw me and came to me and said, Assalamu alaikum, شو ما تعمل? What are you doing? And I didn't know what he was asking about. He was like, listen, man. And he was very strict. He was, if you are coming here to cry, it's not too far, it's not too late. Here is the crossing, please go back. We are not here to have you come here and cry. If you are here to do some work, ahlan wa sahlan. If you are here to cry, listen, no offense, we love you, thank you for trying, but wallahi, come back, the microbus is still waiting for you. They can't take you back to Cairo. So I was like, no, I'm sorry. I wiped my teeth, I went on. I thought he was a little bit rough, but I was like, khair inshallah. We jumped into the bus, and as we were jumping into the bus, the driver, who's a local Ghazan, he was like, yeah, man, I feel bad for that doctor and whatnot. I know how he's doing it. I was like, which doctor? And he pointed at the same guy who came and told me to stop crying. And they said, what's up with him? He said, this guy lost his entire family 3 days ago. Everyone, his wife, he has 3 kids, his mother, they were all in one house. Because he belongs to the Ministry of Health, technically he's a combatant according to the IDF criteria. So they got his house. He wasn't in the house, but they killed everyone. He's the only one who survived. And that was 3 days before our arrival. And that was the same guy who came to me and said, if you're going to cry, please go back. We don't want you. Now, I'm not sharing his name just because I think for security reasons, I don't want to share his name. But wallahi al-azim, and that was the attitude from the beginning. That was the attitude from everywhere. I think I hear this word, people who know the Ghazan accent, they have very specific way of pronouncing certain things. They say Helgate. I think I hear the word Helgate مش وقت دموع. Now is not the time for tears. More than 500 times. Everywhere you go, you see people who are affected personally. Either themselves, they are injured, or they lost family member, or they lost their house. And without you promoting them, as if it's the slogan in Gaza, the slogan was, Helgate مش وقت دموع. Now it's not the time for tears. And that was when that doctor told me, that was when he came to me, when he tapped on my shoulder and said, go back if you're going to cry. That's what he said. He said, Helgate مش وقت دموع. Now it's not time for crying. If you're going to cry, go back. So subhanAllah, that was the attitude from going in. So we went into the European hospital. One thing that really shook me really, really hard at the European hospital, shook me hard the bad way, not the good way. As we are exiting the bus, all the little kids, when you, I'm sure you've seen it, the little kids come around, they see a foreigner, they see a visitor. All of them came to us and they start speaking in English. And they start saying, hello, how are you? And with a very, very broken English. And they said, Assalamu alaikum, ana akhukum min Syria. I'm your brother from Syria. And they were shocked. They looked at each other as if he's joking. And they asked around, it's like, what's going on? Why are they shocked? Why are they speaking in English? And why are they acting funny that I'm saying I'm your brother from Syria? They said, unfortunately, for the last 7 to 8 years before the active war, any aid worker coming inside Gaza, 99.9% they were foreigner, they were non-Muslims. So all the kids, they are used, the minute they see someone who's not local Ghazawi, they will assume he or she is a foreigner, non-Muslim. So for them, that was drilled in their mind that anyone who's coming to help us is non-Muslim, which really, really shook me really bad. SubhanAllah, it tells us how, and I know, alhamdulillah, now all the emotions, everyone want to go to Gaza now. But SubhanAllah, I feel the gentle atab, if you will, from Ahl Gaza, from the people of Gaza on us. Where were you before October 7th? How come we haven't seen any of you before October 7th? And I'm guilty of that. Like, honestly, I felt extremely guilty. I made it all the way to Uganda, but I never made an effort to go to Gaza. Shame on me, and shame on all of us, honestly, because somehow we forgot about them, and we only showed our emotions now when the active conflict happened. So subhanAllah, that's something. And again, I'm not shaming anyone more than what I'm shaming myself. I think I'm guilty in that more than anyone else.
Well, Dr. Bara, it's something that I think we all have to grapple with. When the Messenger of God, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa ala alihi, tells us that none of you truly believe until you love for your brother what you would love for yourself. And, there's different stages of even coming to that realization of what a love for a brother or sister really means. Yeah. And so I think in this regard, I think we're all questioning where our love for anyone suffering, and in particular the people of Palestine, Ard al-Haram, the sanctity of this holy sanctity has been. And so, but it's woken up so many hearts in such an amazing way, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
But please continue on. So, you get to the hospital.
So I made it to Shuhada al-Aqsa Hospital. It's a small hospital. The capacity of that hospital outside the war is 150. So they can accommodate 150 patients.
That's like 150, what we would hear in the States here, there's 150 beds in this hospital.
Exactly. Okay. They say at the time of a crisis, which is funny to hear that word crisis, they can crank it up to 180 or maybe 200 beds. When I arrived at the hospital, there were 950 patients. 950 patients in the hospital. Those are the actual patients. Now, other than the patients, so forget the 950 patients, it is estimated, no one counted them because it's impossible to count. It's estimated that in that hospital, there are between 10,000 to 15,000 people living inside the hospital. I'm not talking about the people living like outside at the gate. Inside the hospital, at the corridor, and it's one of the pictures I sent you earlier, if we can show it.
Yeah, we'll try to get it.
Yes, that's the one. So this is the bedroom for many decent Ghazawi family. And it was extremely humbling to see that this is their bedroom. This is where they live. This is where they wake up. This is how they spend their day. So this corridor here, like this, there are anything from 10,000 to 15,000 people. And this is another picture. Yes, thank you. Now, we all know the culture in the Middle East. We all know the culture of the modesty. And I honestly, I don't know how those families were, okay, the word okay is not appropriate, not okay, but they were somehow forced to accept this living condition. But subhanAllah, that was the only option they have for them. And those are the people who consider themselves lucky because at least they found a shelter inside the hospital. So
can I ask you some question in terms of, was there running water? I mean, it seems like from the pictures there was electricity that was there.
Yes. So there is running water, but very limited. So there are no showers. There are only running water in the tap. That running water is not drinkable. Anyone who has to drink water, you have two options. Me, subhanAllah, and again, that's where I feel extra guilty. I was treated as a VIP there. They will bring the bottle of water to my mattress every day. So every day I am allowed 3 bottles of water. And believe it or not, that's an extreme luxury. 3 bottles, that's a lot. Not everyone do that. Most adults, at least in the hospital, and I'm not talking adults meaning patient. I'm talking adults like nurses, local Ghazawi people. Most of them have 1. And if you are very, very lucky, you get 2 bottles of water a day. Now, those are the employees. And again, the hospital is doing that so they can focus on their job. The patient or anyone else, like the people taking shelters and whatnot, every morning they wake up at 6 or 7 a.m. They have to take a walk to certain points around the hospital where there is a little sahrish. What have you say sahrish in English? Like a tank, like a little mobile tank with clean water, drinking water, where they go. They stand in a long line, and they send you one of the videos. You can see in the videos they're standing for long lines, waiting for their turn to take some water, which is drinkable water. So it takes anything from 2 to 5 hours to get your share of drinking water every day for any local Ghazawi. Again,
And
for
that
me,
share of water is what are they?
a gallon or 2 gallon, a gallon or 2 gallon. So usually for each adult, when they stand in the line, they can fill 1 or 2 gallons, and that's it. So if they have more, they wouldn't give it to them. They say, come back or stand at the end of the line again to get more water. But again, unfortunately, again, that's why I feel almost hypocritical describing their misery, because I didn't live any of that. I got my 3 bottles of water delivered to my pillow every day. So yeah, so we talked about electricity, running water. So shower, there was no shower. I've met so many Gazan people that we talked about wound infection, how to minimize wound infection. Many of them has not showered since October 7. And again, I went in February, so that was 3 months in. To my knowledge, that hasn't changed till now. So many of them has not taken a shower for 6-month period, which again, for me, I cannot even imagine that, but subhanallah.
Yeah, that I mean, just hearing that, is something that's shocking and something that hits the heart so hard, Dr. Bara. And and you're talking about the number of people that were living in that particular hospital was a number of about how many? You said
10,000 to 15,000.
10,000 to 15,000 people, spread throughout.
And those are living in the corridors and whatnot. Those are, so roughly speaking, from what I estimated, for every bathroom, meaning functioning bathroom where you can flush the toilet and you can wash your hand, not a shower, just flush toilet, wash your hand. For each bathroom, roughly speaking, 500 to 600 people share one bathroom.
Wow. This,
So it is a project. It is for their, like, they plan their day about going to the bathroom, because when you go to the bathroom, there is a line, at least 20, 50, 60 people waiting for the bathroom. So they plan their day about going to the bathroom.
incredible. And I want to ask you, like, during the COVID years here, you go to the Walmarts or the Target and people were getting into fist fights over toilet paper and all these sort of crazy things. Did you see the Ghazan people fighting with each other over water and fighting with each other over what was the situation amongst the Ghazans?
And subhanallah, and we can talk about that, and that's a very dear subject that we should talk about, the idea of, because you hear people saying, oh, Ghazan people are very strong, very resilient, mashallah, they are unbreakable, which is true, but I think there is some caveat to that. I think we should talk about that in a minute. And
Okay, sure.
that's a very sensitive subject that I think we should talk about, the resilience versus misery of the Ghazan people. But to answer your question, I was absolutely humbled to see that the civil peace has not been broken yet. Wallah al-Azim, it blew my mind. Wallahi, I saw it with my eyes. They will be like an A truck will come to deliver some bread, and each adult will take 2 pieces of bread, 2 loaf of bread. And there will be a line, that line will be almost like 400 people standing in the line for those bread. Wallah al-Azim, here in the US, I've seen people sneaking into the line, trying to come. It's like, I'm running behind and whatnot, and they will try to sneak. Wallah al-Azim, not once I saw someone trying to break into the line. You will see a line, 400 people walking in. I've seen situations, I witnessed that myself, where, let's say there are like 400 people, they reach number 300 and the bread is gone. So they reach number 301 and they said, I'm sorry, we have no bread. I'm sorry, we are done for the day. So you have 100 people waiting. They have been waiting for the last, God knows, 2, 3, 4 hours, who suddenly were told, I'm sorry, there is no bread for you today. Go away. You would think they will see someone like a kid walking in front of them with some bread. At least one of them will try to snatch one loaf of bread from that little kid. Wallah al-Azim, I haven't seen that not even once. You will see a kid walking with two loaf of bread, and two loaf of bread, that's a luxury there. And I would see a kid walking with those bread, and you would think that someone will try to bully him, someone will try to muscle him, someone will try to intimidate him to take that bread from him. Not once. Maybe it happened and I didn't see it, but at least where I was in Deir al-Balah, I have not seen that at all.
Which is incredible because we've actually seen videos of quite the opposite. Young kids walking around without anything and them being given food, and being taken care of. And this just shows you the beauty of Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa ala alihi. It's just penetrating all of these amazing hearts. So, Dr. Bara, I want to bring it into, the patients that you took care of and what you saw. But I want to bring something up to everyone on screen, Sajjad, if we can bring it up. We don't have to play this whole video, but it's a video I think everyone should watch. And it deals with the weapons, the unusual weapons that the IDF is using inside Gaza, because I'm sure you saw some very horrific things and some very horrific wounds that were there. And so I just want to bring everyone's attention to this video that's on YouTube. Sajjad, can we just show everyone the title of it, and maybe even they can get the URL? It's called right here, Israel's Top 5 Unusual Weapons Inside Gaza. And it goes on to talk about, the Gaza Strip is one of the most, just talks about the different sort of weapons, the capabilities that they have, and what sort of things that they're using inside there. Because why is this so important? Dr. Baraa is going to explain for us some of the terrible wounds that he saw within the Gazan children and the men. We can just fast forward a little bit, Judge, so everyone sees. And so we're going to discuss some of this, but I want everyone to watch this video so you can see. Here's a perfect example of some of these crazy military artillery that's being used all throughout Gaza. So, here, what is that called? K0. What was that, Judge? Did you see that? But Dr. Baraa, please, walk us through. Yeah.
So many times, and that was, in a way, cultural shock that came to me when I arrived. They will call me and say, we need you to the emergency room. I will be in the operating room. We need you in the emergency room right away. Someone got shot in the leg. And again, I'm not new to those things. I've spent so many years dealing with gunshot to the wounds and to the leg and to the heart and whatnot. For me, as I'm walking to the ER, I'm expecting a hole that big, which is maybe maximum 1 centimeter, a bullet going in. And usually the entry point is smaller than the exit point. So 1 centimeter in the leg, 3 centimeter outside the other side from the leg. I've never in my life seen such injuries from one bullet. They will call me to assess someone with one bullet by the IDF to the leg. And I will walk to the leg, and there is, without exaggeration, 10 to 15 centimeter gap within the tissue, just no tissue. Like literally, there will be tissue here, leg here, in between 15 centimeter gap where there is no tissue, no bone, no arteries, no muscle, nothing, just one bullet. And I'm not an expert in military weapons. I have no idea what kind of bullet is that, but I know what a usual bullet will look like, which is 1 centimeter entry, 4, maximum 5 centimeter exit. That's it. But to see a gap that big, 15 centimeter, where no bone, no muscle, no arteries, no nerve has been spared, I've never seen that in my life. And one bullet was enough to amputate any extremity. So anyone who got any one bullet in their extremity, that means by definition amputation. There was no salvaging effort at all of that. So I'm not talking about all the bombardment and what I'm talking about, just bullet. One bullet will mean amputation.
And these bullets who are being shot, I mean, are we talking about like snipers here, focusing their fire on people, or is this like,
I don't know. And I don't want to speculate. I want to stick to the truth as much as I know it, because to my knowledge, I haven't seen any active fighting in front of me. I was in the hospital 90% of the time, so I haven't witnessed any fighting myself. So I don't know.
So, Dr. Baraa, walk us through this. Then you're now in the hospital. You set up for us a scene about how many beds maximum could be there, and then the number of patients, and then you're also setting up a scene for us about how many Palestinians are living there. And you said about a group of 18 to 20 of you were in there. And in terms of the local Ghazawis, doctors, how many doctors and nurses are functioning from the hospital who are living there locally?
So from the hospital, there were about total of 20 doctors
Okay.
for the entire 900 patients, which is nothing. Nurses, like real nurses, I think there were one or two nurses, real nurses, but there were so many. We would jokingly say pseudo nurses, which is a random person, could be a taxi driver, it could be an English teacher, who developed to become a nurse, meaning there were so much lack of nurses there. So he or she, that person, will volunteer to learn how to become a nurse and will function as a nurse. So actual nurses, maybe 2 or 3 in the entire hospital. Pseudo nurses, if you want to call them, and this is not meant to disrespect them, but this is what would describe them the best. I would say 50 to 60 maybe.
So the
Now,
queue system here, if you have, I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't.
So no, but the hospital is meant to handle OBGYN cases,
Right.
meaning the operating room or the so-called operating room is nothing more than a procedure room. If you compare it, not even to the US, even to any other field hospital in Syria, in Turkey, in Uganda, it's nothing more than a procedure room. And I think I sent you one of the pictures about me in one of those procedure room. You can see behind me there is only one cabinet. That's it. This is the anesthesiologist intubating one of the kids. And there's another picture where I'm operating, and literally you see behind me just a cabinet. That's it. Yep, exactly. So you see next to my right shoulder, that's it. That's all the instruments that exist in that so-called operating room, which is nothing, literally nothing. That's like a drop in the ocean of any other functional operating room, not in the US, but in the Middle East. I don't think it's fair to compare Gaza to the US. I'm comparing Gaza to similar countries within the Middle East, Syria, Turkey, Jordan. This is nothing. Anyway, so you do the surgery. So before that, I think one thing that people should know about, very often we will hear the bombardment. Very often we will even see the rocket coming at the house and destroying the house. And I remember 1 or 2 incidents where it was extremely traumatic. Not only we saw the rocket, but we could hear the people screaming under the rubble. Now, here is where it becomes disgusting. So imagine all of that is okay. Imagine for 1 second. We could hear them. We can hear them screaming. We saw the bombardment. We saw the missile hitting the house. It takes anything from 4 hours to 8 hours to get those patients to come to us, even though it's literally sometimes walking distance. Walking distance, it takes 4 hours to 8 hours to reach us, simply because anyone who tries to go help them will be killed right away. There is always a drone 24/7. They call it in the local Ghazawi language, they call it Zannana, because it's 24/7. So that Zannana, that drone, is literally going above us all the time. You see it all the time. And anytime there is a bombardment, anyone who tries to go help them right away, the Zannana, the drone, will get them right away. So usually until everything clears out, until the IDF forces back up, only then you can go and bring the wounded or whoever is still alive. So usually the delay time is anything from 4 hours to 8 hours, which was really traumatic because literally we can see the airstrike happening, we can hear it, but we couldn't do anything for them for another 4 to 8 hours. If you compare that to the US or anywhere here, like here, when we have a trauma, usually as the ambulance is driving to the hospital, they call the hospital and tell them, we are 8 minutes away from you. There, it's 8 hours delay. I can't tell you how many times an ambulance guy will come to me and he will bring me 4 or 5 kids. And I think I sent you a picture with one of those. You have 4 kids. If you can show it, I know it is disturbing, but I think we owe it to the people to show it to them. So if you can show the picture, if you feel it's appropriate. 4 kids, he brought them to us and we put them in front of us. And as I'm examining them, yes, so those here. So unfortunately, so he gave them to us. And as I'm examining them, those 2 in the far, they were motionless. They were pulseless. they passed away. And the other one, so if you see that, so you see that kid here closer to us at 6 o'clock, and there is another picture where you see that kid and the kid next to him. Those two were alive. Now, the ambulance guy, and this is just one example, he swore to me, yes, this is the other one. So he brought those 4 kids in one trip. He brought them, he held like 2 at the time. He dropped them, he went back, he dropped the other 2. Those 2 were alive. Clearly, they have significant injuries. I don't want to go into too much gruesome details, but his head was blown out, but he was still alive. Those 2 were still alive. The other 2 were martyrs. The ambulance guy would swear to me that 4 hours ago, when he reached the area, all 4 of them were screaming. They were alive. But it took him 4 hours to reach us. So by the time they reach us, 2 استشهدوا, martyred. And the other 2 were alive, and I don't know what happened to them after that, because one of them had significant head injury. Literally, his brain was exposed, so I don't know what happened to him afterward. But the point is, at the time of the injury, at the time of the ambulance arrival, all 4 were alive. Just by the virtue of waiting 4 hours, 2 passed away.
So tell us, Dr. Baraa, these children come in or other patients come in. What tools do you have? What do you have? Pain numbing medicines. What do you have to work with there in these hospitals?
Very, very little. And remind me maybe later to tell you the story about the ketamine. The ketamine has a very special story that happened there, but very little. And unfortunately, because of the limited resources, most of the surgeries I've done were amputations. And just to give you perspective, just again, this is the public health speaking inside me. I was keeping a record, a log of all the cases that I was doing there, just for my own education, to see what cases I'm doing, what cases I'm not doing, and whatnot. By day 4, I looked at my log and I broke into tears, because I realized that in 4 days in Deir al-Balah, I've done more amputations, mostly on kids in 4 days, than I have done here in the US in 2 years. So in 4 days, I've done more amputation than what I've done here in 2 years in the US. And I'm a vascular surgeon, so that's my specialty. I am responsible for amputating the leg when there's a vascular disease and whatnot. So that's what I do for a living. But still, in 4 days, I've done more than what I've done here in 2 years. One story that stood up to me, and again, this is what I told you, as a public health, I wouldn't go into that story, but I think I owe it to the people to hear those stories, to tell the misery, to tell what's going on in Gaza. A kid came to me, and there was a bombardment. At the time he came, and his right arm was completely gone. It was already amputated. We don't even have the remaining pieces of his body, but it was already amputated at the elbow. The left arm, the 4th and 5th finger were already gone. The 3rd finger was hanging by a thread. Now, that baby, from my estimation, he was 9 to 12 months. We don't know why, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute. But from my estimation, 9 to 12 months from the appearance of his diaper and from his growth, I think he's 10 months old. So I'm thinking about, what do I do with this kid? His right arm is completely gone. His left arm, he has 2 fingers, and the 3rd one is hanging by a thread. So I spent about 2 hours suturing and attaching all the tendons, all the vessels of the 3rd finger. And my hope was, if I can give him a functional 3rd finger, at least he can feed himself. So at least he can do this and feed himself independently. So I spent 2 hours doing my best work I can ever do to attach the 3rd finger. And I think I did it, but I'm very, for the lack of better word, I'm very proud of myself. I'm happy. I cannot wait to tell his parents that, listen, I'm sorry about the bad news. We lost one hand, but guess what? I managed to save this finger. So alhamdulillah, there is hope for your son. So please don't despair. So I cannot wait to tell the parent. So I'm removing my gown. I'm telling the staff, show me where is his parents so I can update them. And they looked at me and they said, no one told you? And they said, told me what? They said, I thought we told you, but his whole family is wiped out. His parents, His 4 siblings, he's number 5, he's the youngest of 5, they were all dead. And even his uncle and his uncle wife and whatnot, they were in the same house, they were all gone. There was no surviving family member for this kid. And honestly, and again, that's where I think the numbers, that's where I myself, I object to using the numbers in Gaza. When we say 20 people died today in Gaza, like today, the news in Rafah, 20 people, one here, 500 injured and whatnot. On what basis those numbers are going to describe to you the misery of this one kid that I'm telling you his story? Like what magnitude can explain the misery of this kid who's barely 10 months old, according to my estimation, growing up? He has no hand. He has 2.5 fingers. He lost everyone. What can explain to the world? What can explain to our wonderful politicians here in the US? What can explain to anyone who's still supporting the Israeli advances in Gaza? What can explain the misery of this little kid? And this is where I told you I'm gonna break my own rule about staying away from emotional and personal story, because I really think nothing can explain the numbers better than a story like this.
Yeah, it's every time you're sharing one of these stories, to be honest with you, Dr. Bara, I'm thinking of the health minister of Gaza, that man, and what he said to you, because every time the heart wants to break down, the tears want to come out, and I'm just thinking of what he said and saying, no, we each have a job to do. By Allah's rahmah, is to get their stories out in any way, shape, and form that we can, because there are beautiful people across this world who are not even Muslim; they're just human, and their hearts are bleeding with what's happening. And if they could change it, they would change it. But of course, the realm of the politicians and the satanic system that we see at play in front of us is trying to do what it's trying to do. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do what He will do, subhanahu. So, Dr. Barat, so are most of the people that you are there operating on, are they children, or was that where your primary focus was, or were you generalized?
So I operated in everyone, and as a general rule, as a doctor, that I am bound by the Geneva Convention, I am obligated to treat everyone, and I've done it before. So before in Northwest Syria, I was inside Northwest Syria where the Syrian regime was attacking us. The same soldier who was he was a sniper, the same sniper who was shooting at us, and he killed many of our colleagues. They captured him, and he was shot in the abdomen. That same soldier, Syrian soldier, who came to me with an injury, who was shooting at us, I treated him. I treated him honestly as if I'm treating any other human. What happens to him is none of my business. Afterward, I don't know what happened to him. Most likely he didn't make it, but at least I did my part as a doctor. And same in Gaza. I said it before, and I've said before, even if an Israeli soldier come to me, I will treat him or her. I will treat everyone. So I treated everyone. I didn't make any exception. However, 90% of my patients were kids and women. Now, the 10% who are men or male, I know nothing about their background. I know nothing, but they came to us, I treated them, and they know nothing about them. But 90% of my patients were women and children more than women, because somehow adults, they know how to shelter themselves. They know how to take shelter. Kids, they don't know. They don't have it inside them to have that instinct. Maybe the fitrah that Allah created us, part of that fitrah wasn't how to hide from bombardment, because maybe, I don't know, but yes, most of them were kids.
Yeah, and it's amazing because we're seeing in a lot of the news stories that most of the people that are being impacted by these attacks are women and are children, and you're saying that that's many of the people that you operated on. So you stayed there in the hospital for a period of how long?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. And so most of the injuries that you were seeing were injuries that had to do with bombings of homes, people under rubble,
Mhm.
or direct shots upon them.
Yes. And then remember, I told you there is always a gap between the actual bombardment
Yeah,
and the arrival of the patient. So anytime I see a bombardment, I know I have 4 to 6 hours of free time, or so-called free time.
yeah.
So those 4 to 6 hours, I will do rounds in the hospital. There are 900 patients that they were operated on, but there was no one following up on them. So there was no such a thing like the US, where where a doctor do rounds on the patient and whatnot. That doesn't exist simply because there are not enough doctors and nurses to do that. So I would take it upon myself to do rounds on myself, and that wasn't any easier. So very often I will walk to the floor and I would see someone with a big bandage on their leg and say, "Assalamu alaikum, Hajj. When was the last time someone changed bandage on you?" And the answer varies. It depends whether they have family or not. If they have family, usually they are more proactive about changing the dressing. Just as a background, here in the US or in any normal civilized hospital, you should change the dressing at least once a day, at least, sometimes more. So I would ask that patient, when was the last time someone changed the dressing for you? And the answer varies, anything from 10 days to 6 weeks. And immediately, anytime I hear someone who hasn't changed the dressing for more than 2 weeks, I know this is bad. So I have my scissor, my heavy scissor, and I will just cut down the dressing to change it myself. I have my own bandage that I bought with me from the US. I can't tell you how many times, and I apologize, this is disturbing, but I think, again, someone has to listen to this. As I'm cutting the bandage, maggots or worms are coming out from the wound. Because no one has changed the dressing for up to 6 weeks, the wound is infested with maggots and worms, and the leg is just dead, or the arm, or whatever part of the body it is. And I can't tell you how many times I just went to do some dressing change, just to change the bandage. And then usually by the end of this round, I'm calling the operating room and saying, patient so-and-so, this. I will give them a list, anything from 10 to 15 patients, who I will bring with me to the OR to amputate their legs or their arms. So usually in my free time, or so-called free time, as I'm waiting for the victims of the bombardment to arrive, I'm doing this round, I'm changing dressing. At least 5 to 10 patients will get some maggots and worm in their legs. So I just drag them with me to the operating room. I just cut their leg just to save their life, because clearly if there are maggot and worms, it's a matter of time before it just eats them alive. So we just cut the leg just to save their life. And that happens so many times.
And I can only imagine, Dr. Bara, the emotional toll, as you were saying, and this is an issue that you brought up earlier about you have a couple things I want to touch base, the strong nature of the Gazan people, but also, people break, a human being is a human being. And so, if you could just walk us through some of the emotional toll of what you're seeing happening on the people there.
And I think, and thank you so much for bringing that, because I think that's a very, very serious subject we should talk about. And I think in a way we are being unfair to the Gazan people. Because very often when people talk about the people of Gaza, they say, well, they are very strong, nothing will shake them and whatnot, which is partially true. But in a way, unfortunately, that dehumanized them. Because at the end of the day, they're human. They are just like you and me. When someone bothers them, they break into tears. And I know I told you the story of someone saying no tears, but that person lost his family 3 days before. Yeah. And maybe by day 3, he managed to contain himself and say no tears. But at the time of the injury, there were a lot of tears. There was a lot of sadness. And again, I think unintentionally, we try to ascribe strength to the Gazan people by saying, mashallah, they are very strong. But in a way, my personal opinion, I think we are almost dehumanizing them, because they do break into tears. They do have issues. I think many people ask me, what was the most common surgery you've done there in Gaza? And the actual surgery I've done is the amputation. But the other surgery that it's not surgery that I've done is what I called al-kitf al-muballal, which translates into the soaken shoulder. I can't tell you how many times when the victims arrive and then their family arrive and they see that their loved one is killed, they will break into tears. And literally, I would stand there sometimes for up to 20 minutes, just having them break on my shoulder. And they cry and they cry. They cry for 20 minutes. What's amazing though, and I remember one incident where a man, I think he was my age, I think he was in his late 30s, both his parents, his wife, his 2 kids were killed in one strike. And he came to the ER and he saw all of them, literally one next to each other, they're all dead. So he broke into tears. And I took him, I hugged him, and he put his head here, and he cried and cried for like 20 minutes, to the point where when he was done, my shoulder was a mix of tears, blood, because he was all bloody. So it was mix of tears, saliva, mucus, blood. People thought that I was shot. One of the nurses came to me and said, "Doc, are you shot here? Did someone shoot you?" Because it was so muggy here because of all the tears that he put on my shoulder. What's amazing is, so he cried for 20 minutes. Later on, like he was trying to clean the bodies, trying to see where he's going to bury them. Few hours later, the time for Salat al-Maghrib came. And of course, there is no time to go and pray in the room and whatnot. We all pray wherever we are. Like anytime there is a prayer time, we just do Allahu Akbar and we start praying in the middle, whenever we have. Wallahi, as I'm praying, as I'm saying, Assalamu alaikum, he was next to me. He was praying Maghrib. The same guy that he lost his entire family, he was weeping, he was crying for 20 minutes. When the time came for Maghrib, he stood, he prayed. And then I was listening to him. And then after we said Assalamu alaikum, he started saying Ayatul Kursi. And then I was listening, I was trying to see what he's saying. Like I thought he was making some dua. So he thought I was listening to him. He said, "Oh yeah, I do Ayatul Kursi after each salah, because Ayatul Kursi, if you do Ayatul Kursi, it will save you from the punishment at the grave and whatnot. So I do that all the time." And he was educating me about Ayatul Kursi. And that's the same guy that,
Subhanak ya Rabbi, Subhanak. Yeah, this is the human being, but what's amazing about it, Dr. Baraa, it's a human being whose heart is still attached to Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we're not angels, we're humans, and humans have a range of emotions that the angels don't have, and we have that connection to Allah to be able to deal with those. I can never imagine to walk a foot in this man's shoes. But look, what a beautiful thing for us is, like, with everything that you're describing, that you personally saw in front of your eyes that this man lost. And he's not questioning al-Mawla subhanahu. He's not questioning God. He's praying to him. He's next to you. And then he's reading his ayat and telling you the barakah of the surah, of the Ayatul Kursi.
and the reason why I'm telling you all of this, again, I don't want to make it sound, because again, we do it unintentionally where we dehumanize them. We're like, nothing will break them. Well, yes, something will break them. I think the story that comes to my mind from the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I think you know the story, maybe you can tell it better than me, when there was this Sahabiya, this lady who lost, I forgot, either her husband or her son, and she was crying, and then the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam came behind her, and he tried to offer condolences, and she didn't know it was the Prophet. He said, "Ilayka anni," like, leave me alone. You don't know what's going on with me. And the Prophet, sure, he left. And then the people came to him and said, "Did you know what you just did? You just said that to the Prophet." And then she immediately went and apologized to him and whatnot. To me, this is how I envision the Gazan people. Yes, they break down. Yes, they cry. But immediately when the time comes to go back, they snap back into what a true faith and Iman has.
Yeah, because faith and Iman, Dr. Baraa, it doesn't shield us from experiencing trauma and pain, but it gives us a tool as to how to process it. And that's the beauty. That's why we're human. Dr. Baraa, you had mentioned earlier in our conversation a ketamine story that you wanted to bring up, if you could.
So yeah, that story also a story that touched me, because again, I think we owe it to the Gazan people to tell their stories. So ketamine, just as a background for people who are not into medicine, ketamine is a wonderful drug used by many intelligence and dark secret police, especially in the Middle East or anywhere there is a dictatorship. Because ketamine is a medication, when you give it to the patient goes into a subconscious stage where he or she says things they don't want to say. So that's why they use it in interrogation. They use it in torture, because they give it to the patient or to the hostage in this case, and the hostage will say things that they shouldn't say. That's what it's used for many dictatorships. The beauty of ketamine is it's a very strong anesthetic, and it's very, very cheap. And mainly, it's the main anesthetic drug available in Gaza right now. So most surgeries in Gaza now done with the patient and their ketamine. Which is good that they have it, like patient is not feeling anything. But as I said, it takes the patient into dissociated stage where they say things in their subconscious they wouldn't want to tell you. There was one patient who had multiple injuries. He lost one arm. He had very bad gap injury on the other, same on the legs and whatnot. We couldn't do the dressing change on the floor because it was so deep. So we will bring him every other day to the operating room or to the procedure room. We will give him some ketamine just to change the dressing for 5-10 minutes. And it will just relieve him from the pain so we can do the dressing change without torturing him. And we'll do that. Now, this kid, I got to know him and I got to know his diseased parents through him through those 14 days. Why? Because every time we bring him and we give him ketamine, he starts talking to his deceased father. And he will talk to his father. His father passed away a few weeks before his injury. He was martyred. And he will talk to his father and he will say, "Isma' yaba." And that was his slogan, or that was how he started the conversation with his deceased father. He'll say, "Isma' yaba, listen up, dad. Today, this and this and this happened. And Isma' yaba, today I wanted to eat this, but they didn't have this, so I ate this instead." And literally, and I was like, "Isma', remember when we did this and this a few months ago? I did it again yesterday," and whatnot. And he will talk with his dad for minutes and minutes until we are done. And I will enjoy listening to that because I literally got to know his father through him. His father passed away a while ago, like a few weeks ago. And day 12 of my stay there, we brought him. And again, the minute we gave him the ketamine, he started talking with his father. On that day, he said, "Isma' yaba, I saw God yesterday. And I asked God about you, and he said, you are doing fine, Baba. And then I asked God about Mama, and he said, you are doing fine. She's doing fine." And he started mentioning all his family members who were killed a few weeks ago. He started mentioning them one by name. And he would say, "Isma' yaba, I asked Allah about so-and-so, and he said he's doing fine. He's happy." And then toward the end, he said, "Isma' yaba, I told God what those people are doing to me." He said, "قلت له لله هدول الناس قديش بيعذبوني والله قال لي أنا اللي حدبر لك إياهم." He said, I told God about how those people are torturing me. And he said, God told me, Allah told me, I will take care of them for you. And then soon after that, he went into coma and he passed away 2 hours later. So those were the last words that I've heard from him before he went into coma. That I told God about how those people are torturing me. And God said, I will take care of them for you. And subhanAllah, to this day, I wish I shook him to ask him. I woke him up to ask him what he was talking about. Was he talking about me? Because I know if he was talking about me, that I'm torturing him. I'm doing the dressing change. I'm poking in his open abdomen and whatnot. So I know if he was talking about me or about someone else. But to this day, I worry that he's talking about me. And subhanAllah, that's one of the things that hunt me down really bad. That subhanAllah, those, wallahi, they are suffering a lot. And God knows what's going to happen at the day of judgment when we are asked about that suffering.
Oh, subhanAllah, Bara, subhanAllah, the experiences there and what you saw from the Ghazan people. La ilaha illa Rabbi. Bara, let me ask you, Dr. Bara, coming out of this situation, let's assume there's a cease of hostilities tomorrow, and given your background, what is the medical situation of Gaza going to be?
So we have, according to rough estimation, we have 35,000 martyrs. I think honestly, those are the lucky people. Wallahi al-Azim, I have zero sadness for those because wallahi, I think they are in better place. Wallahi, they've got it. Wallahi, those are the winners. My heart goes for the estimated 100,000, 110,000 injured people. And I already told you the story about the maggots and worms growing out of their bodies. So I think the focus should be on those people, on those 100,000 people. A, to make sure they don't have any more complications. B, to make sure they have enough rehab to go back to being functional life. Again, most of those people are fairly otherwise healthy, functional human beings. If we don't give them some meaningful rehab, they will literally swore to be nothing. They will literally lose hope or lose any meaningful life, even though they are still at the beginning of life. So I think those are the focus. Make sure they don't have any complications. Make sure they have enough rehab for the remaining, at least for the next few months. Now, with that being said, most of the hospitals, most of the rehab centers have been completely destroyed. I was told, I haven't visited before, there was a state-of-art prosthesis center in Gaza City, where they did really, really high-end prosthetic for anyone who is an amputee. Somehow the IDF thought that was a military target, and that was demolished from early on. That was one of the very, very early target at the beginning of the war. That was completely leveled to the ground. So some work needs to be done at that level.
And so, in terms of the hospital situations, I mean, how long would it take to get hospitals functioning again?
Just as a background, before the war, the developed part of Gaza was the northern part, which is Gaza City. That's where most of the advanced hospitals exist. The southern part of Gaza, which is Rafah and Khan Yunis, that was the so-called the underdeveloped part of Gaza. So even before the war, Rafah, which used to be a home of 300,000 people, did not have a CAT scan even before the war. No CAT scan in the whole city of Rafah, where there is 1,500,000 people right now. Not even one CAT scan. There is one CAT scan in Khan Yunis and one in Deir al-Balah, but there is nothing in Rafah.
About one
in Deir al-Balah and one in Khan Yunis. So to go back to your point, the developed part of Gaza was in the northern part, which is Mashfa Shifa, Mashfa al-Ma'madani. Those were the elite hospitals where it used to provide really high-end medical care. Those were completely destroyed. I haven't visited Mashfa Shifa myself, but from the pictures I saw, it's still standing, but almost all the functional unit on it is completely destroyed. When the IDF went in, they made an effort to destroy any functional thing. One of the doctors who was with me in Deir al-Balah, he told me he witnessed when the IDF soldiers were going in, even the printer or scanner, they would just put a bullet on it just to destroy the printer. So even a printer or a scanner or a screen of a computer, they will shoot it just to make sure it's not functional afterward. So that's what the level of functionality those hospitals are, which is pretty much zero.
And in terms of Dr. Baraa, widespread disease starting to spread, throughout Gaza, did you see any of this? Do you experiencing this? Do you have fears of this?
I do have fears of it. I didn't see it simply because I was in January, which was still very cold time. And as you know, those diseases happen more in the summertime. So I think it's going to happen now. And that's why I'm extremely fearful of any invasion of Rafah, because I think it will be the massacres of all massacres. It will be the mother of all disasters if they go inside Rafah. With 1.5 million people inside, they're already crammed on top of each other. If they force them to mobilize with the sub-hygienic situation, I really, really worry about all those diseases starting now. But I didn't witness it myself simply because I was in January, which is the winter time.
Dr. Baraa, as we're sort of coming to sort of a close here, when I spoke to you on the phone before we had this conversation and I asked you about the Gazan people, you said to me three things, and one of them was heroism.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the three things I want people to think of Gaza right now: the misery. I don't think we do them any favor by telling them, oh, they are fine. They are not fine. They are really miserable. Yet they have a lot of resilience. I know that. And if we have time, I can tell you one story about resilience in a minute, if we have extra time.
Yeah, of course.
And then the third one is heroism, the idea of heroism. And that's something very, very dear to me. I am a father of 3 little kids. So my kids are 7, 4, and 1. Now, it really bothers me anytime when we describe to our kids, to our youth, the idea of heroes, the idea of strong people. We don't have anyone relevant in our time now. We usually refer to the past time. And don't get me wrong, I have nothing against the old times. I love all the Sahaba. I love when we talk about the heroism of Ali ibn Abi Talib, of Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, Khalid ibn al-Walid. Those were true heroes. But I do have issue, and maybe I'm wrong, but I do have issue with telling our kids that the only heroes that we have as Muslim existed in the past. I do have serious issue with that. Again, this is not by any mean disrespect to the Sahaba. Wallahi, you know me. But I do think we should offer to our youth and our kids heroes from this time. And I cannot think of any better example of heroes other than those doctors and nurses who are functioning in Gaza right now. So next time when my son Malik asks me about what a hero is, I'm not going to tell him it's a Superman or Batman or any of those crazy characteristics. I will tell them about some of the heroes in the past in our ancient history, but I'm going to tell them, yes, and those are two doctors, the one in the middle and Nassim and Muhammad. Those two doctors have lost everything. They were in Mashfa al-Shifa بغزة. Those are two orthopedic doctors, the one with the green and the one in the middle. Those were thriving doctors. They used to drive nice cars. They used to have fancy homes. They lost everything. Everything is gone. Everything is wiped out. They don't have homes. The two of them were telling me that they don't even have their degrees to prove they are doctors or orthopedic surgeons anymore. They're just functioning based on the idea that someone knew them from Mashfa Shifa in Gaza. They lost everything. Yet, Wallah al-Azim, they function with the spirit. Wallah al-Azim, this smile that you are seeing in the picture, Wallahi, this wasn't for the camera. That was their smile taking care of patients. That was their smile taking care of all the patients coming back and asking them. We've done cases. I've done 2 cases with those 2 doctors where we spent 16 hours non-stop. We barely have time to pray, and our clothes were just soaked in blood. We prayed because we didn't have time to change with the blood on us. We have 16 hours working with those 2 doctors, and at the end of the 16 hours, I go to my room where they gave me the room. Those 2, they went out to the tent outside the hospital where their wife and kids are sleeping outside the hospital. Now, if those 2 are not real heroes, who is a hero? And I think that's where I think we should change the narrative. I think we owe it to the people of Gaza. And that's a project I started working on right now, alhamdulillah. I'm writing the stories of everyone I met in Gaza, doctors, nurses, and whatnot. And I'm giving it to some people, mashallah, who are talented in writing, to translate it from Arabic to English and to make a novel out of it, a fiction or non-fiction novel. And those are the stories that should be taught to our youth moving forward.
Absolutely.
Again, nothing against telling the stories of Khalid ibn al-Walid or Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, radiyallahu anhum, but I do think we should tell the stories of those heroes. Now, this picture has a very, very... Do we have time for that, or am I over
We
time?
have. I'm just concerned about your time. As long as you're okay, we're okay.
I'm okay. So if
So
I can tell you,
you lead the way. Take us to where we need to go.
so this picture has a very, very beautiful story behind it. And again, it tells you, it summarizes the 3 things that I want people to know about Gaza: the misery, the resilience, and the heroism. So on my last day in Gaza, when I went back to the European hospital in Rafah in preparation to leave the next morning to Al-Qahira, I was walking around and I'm devastated. I saw all the stories that I'm telling you about. I'm walking and I'm literally, my head is down and I'm just walking, just helpless. I'm just depressed. I'm just so sad. This girl behind me, the one who's exactly behind me, the one with the pink shirt, her name is Maysoon. She saw me and she said, Ammo, lesh za'lan? Why are you sad? And I didn't want to tell her. I was like, Yani, you see what's going on and whatnot, and I feel bad and whatnot. And she said, so are you going to go home and you think of Gaza like this? I was like, of course. Yani, wallahi, yani, all I saw is this misery. And I know what to tell you, but yes, I am sad. I know what to tell you. And she said, well, I don't want that. I don't want you to go to your home country and tell your wife and kids and whatnot that we are depressed people. This doesn't fit me. And she said, I'm going to take a picture of you. And I want you, every time of you see this picture, to think of me and smile. And then she called her friends. She called them and said, come on, let's take a picture with Ammo because he's so sad. We want to cheer him up. So they gathered. We took a selfie. I forced myself to smile. And she said, listen, every time you think of Gaza and you are sad, I want you to look at this picture and smile. Would you do that? I said, khalas, bismillah. And then I was really impressed with her manners. I was like, Maysoon, I want to meet your parents. And she said, my parents are gone. They were martyred a few weeks ago. They were in Gaza and we were martyred, and it's me and my uncle who survived, and now my uncle is taking care of me. And I said, well, okay, well, let me like give you some money. So I reach for my wallet, and they want to give her some money just for like she's an orphan and whatnot, and they want to give money and for her and all the little girls with her. And she said, absolutely not. You are not giving me any money. And she turned to her friends and said, I will Baktulkum, I will kill you if you take any money from this guy, because I don't want him to think that we took a picture so he can give us money. So I will kill you. She said, Baktulkum إذا بتاخدوا منه مصاري. I will kill you if you take money from this guy. So no one took money from me, and she refused. Now at this point, I really want to meet someone from her family. I want to establish a connection with her, so to follow up on her, because I was really impressed by her manners. And they said, listen, my son, I know your parents are martyrs. Take me to your uncle. And she said, why? I said, well, I want to stay in touch with him. Before that, we were talking about her going up to become a doctor. And I was joking with her. I was like, yes, if you become a doctor, I want you to become like me, a vascular surgeon and whatnot. So I said, take me to your uncle. At least I want to stay in touch with him so I can keep in touch with you. And inshallah, when you become a doctor, I want to come and I will maybe mentor you, and maybe you will become a vascular surgeon like me. And she paused for a second and said, no need. And at that time, there was some news about ground invasion into Rafah. At that time, the conversation started about ground invasion. And she said, no need to meet my uncle. I said, why? She said, didn't you hear the news? The Israelis are coming into Rafah any minute now. And most likely, by the time you go back to your home country, most likely I will join my parents. I will be gone. And they said, come on, my son, don't say this. And I want you to think of the future. I was trying to be optimistic for her, trying to lift up her spirit. So I was like, no, don't say that. You just told me to smile and be happy. And here you are doing this. I said, no, I'm not sad. Bil'akis, wallahi, she said, nothing will make me happier rather than joining my parents. Because when the war started, my father gathered all of us and said, listen, most likely we're going to be shuhada, we're going to be martyrs by the end of this. So whoever goes first, make dua for the rest to join them and to become shuhada with them. So we're all unite in Jannah, in heaven. So she said, I'm the only one from my direct family. And I know that my parents up there are making dua for me to join them. So I'm not sad. Don't be sad if I'm gone. That's a good thing. I'm just saying, don't worry about me. Don't worry about me following up with my uncle and whatnot, because most likely I'm going to be gone by the time you go home. And then she left. And that's it. I know nothing about her. And to this day, anytime I see a report on Al Jazeera or whatnot, I'm looking in the crowd to see if I can see her picture, because she's in Rafah, in European hospital. So far, I cannot see her. I'm dying to see her again, to see what's going on with her. It could be that maybe her wishes, or subhanAllah, Allah chose her to be a martyr. I don't know. But that was another story that really hit me hard.
It's an incredible story, subhanAllah. And, Allahu Akbar. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless her and all of those kids there. I can only imagine what it's like living these realities, Dr. Baraa, because hearing these realities are very, very challenging. Young kids, you don't.
I will tell you one story. And again, if I'm over my time, please let me know. I can stop, but I don't want to be over time. But this story is another story that tells me this beautiful combination that exists between misery and resilience that exists in people of Gaza. I was once in the operating room, and they called me and said, drop everything and come to the ER right now, which is unusual for them. Usually, even when there are mass casualties, they stabilize things until I'm done, and then they tell me, and they tell them which one we're going to take to the operating room. They said, drop everything now and come to the ER right now. And it was like, subhanallah, like what's going on? We didn't hear any big explosions recently. So I don't know what's the big hurry. We went to the ER and there was this mother. I don't know her age. I think she's my age or a little bit younger. When the explosion happened, her daughter was on her arm. When the heat came, not only it killed her infant daughter who was in her arm, it literally melted the infant on her arm. So her daughter has melted in her arm and became one piece of it. So the daughter is dead. The patient is still alive, semi-awake. She's kind of hallucinating, saying things and whatnot, but she's awake and alive. The daughter is dead, and she's fused with the mother arm. And there was this awkward silence where I knew what they were asking me to do, but I was hoping they wouldn't say it, because I was like, no way they're going to ask me to do this. So there was this awkward silence. They didn't want to say, the ER doctor didn't want to say anything. I kept quiet because I didn't want to even think about what they will ask me to do. And then eventually one of the nurses spoke up and said, doctor, we need to bury this infant. We cannot bury her because she's attached to the mother. And anyway, the arm is dead. Can you just amputate the arm so we can take the baby with the arm and bury them? And they did. So that was late in the evening. I went to my room. I tried to sleep. I couldn't sleep for the whole night because of the gruesome of what I just did, just amputating with the baby on it. The next day, I said to myself, at least I should have the basic manners of giving aza to this lady, to give condolences, because she was semi-awake. I didn't really get to talk to her. So at least I should have the basic manners of saying, Azzamallahu ajrakum, I'm sorry, I cut your arm. So I went, and the minute I walked in, it was obvious that she didn't sleep the night either. You can tell from her eyes, she was awake. You can tell her eyes are beefy red and whatnot. So I'm walking in, I'm kind of one step in, one step back. I don't want to do this, but I have to. So the minute I walked in, she looked at me and said, are you the doctor who cut my arm yesterday? And I kept quiet. And then she started raising her voice. Are you the doctor who cut my arm yesterday? And I'm struggling to speak, and said yes, expecting that she will break down on me. Just 1 second. Amina, معلش تطلعي بابا. Close the door. شكرا حبيبي. Sorry. Amina walked in.
Okay.
And she said, are you the doctor who did it? I said yes. And somehow she cracked a smile and she said, thank you, Jazakallah khairan. And I was in complete meltdown status. I was like, what did you just do? Did you just smile? Why are you smiling? Why are you saying thank you? She said, well, you don't know the story, and I think you should know the story to understand the big picture. I was like, please enlighten me. What's the big picture here? She said, this daughter, she's the last of my kids. She was the last one. Her name is Minnatullah, which translates of the gift of God, the gift of Allah. And she said, Minnatullah was a true gift of Allah in everything. From the minute she was born, she was the easiest child I gave birth to. She was easy in everything. Feeding her was so easy. Playing with her was so easy. Changing her was so easy. She was a true gift of God in everything. And subhanAllah, even now when she went down, when she was martyred, she was a gift of God. I said, how so? She said, think about it. She died, she's a martyr, but she took my arm with her.
Akbar.
And now she's buried with my arm. And I'm hoping and I'm confident that when Allah resurrects her with my arm to take her to the Jannah, she will take my arm with her. And what better gift, what better minna or gift of Allah better than this, that I know that my arm already exists in heaven right now.
Incredible. Incredible.
Now, can you tell me that this lady is not suffering? She's not crying? She's not breaking? Of course she is. I can imagine she's grieving till now. I cannot imagine she's living normal life, even if there's a ceasefire tonight. I cannot imagine. I don't know a lady like this. How can you make it up for her? How can you rebuild her life? Seriously, like what amount of money, what amount of compensation, what amount of rebuilding of Gaza, what amount of rehab can you do for this lady to make her feel normal again? What? I say nothing. So is she suffering? Of course she's suffering. Is she grieving? I'm sure she is till today, if she's still alive. But subhanallah, again, back to the story of that brother who was crying in my shoulder for 20 minutes, but then went to the prayer. Same with this one. She was grieving badly. She was crying all night, but still somehow she saw the light or the barakah or the blessing that her hand exists in heaven as we speak.
Incredible. Yeah, no, barakallah fiqh, Dr. Bara. I think you've brought a very beautiful picture for all of us, a very real picture for all of us about the suffering of the people of Gaza, but also the human nature and how they're processing that suffering through this constant connection to Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa alihi. Dr. Bara, I want to give you the last, closing word. Anything that you just want to share and say to anyone that's listening out there from our audience.
Very often, when people hear this, understandably and rightfully so, people get emotional. They want to see what can we do to help. And very often, which kind of bothers me, people give you the attitude that there's nothing we can do. And that really, really, really bothers me. And that has to stop. Because if each one of us has something to offer, and I'm not talking about the beyond basics. So for now, I think the three basic that everyone should be doing is making dua, making prayer for them, donation for any organization that you deem appropriate, and that's on you guys, everyone to do their homework to find it, and to do some kind of protest or some political activism to call your representative to do someone. So those three, those are the basic. I could argue that if you are not doing those three by now, I will seriously question your faith. I'm sorry to say that. I don't like to be that judgmental guy, but I genuinely worry about any person who call himself or herself a Muslim or practicing Muslim who's not doing those three constantly by now. So those are given. In my mind, those are given. What can you do beyond that? Again, it really bothers me, and I think I can go on a limb and say I think it bothers the people of Gaza if they hear anyone saying this. I cannot do anything. Yes, you can. And I'm talking beyond those three things. So each one of us can do something. So like we see now what's happening with the universities encampment. Most of those kids are not Muslims. Most of those kids don't even believe in any God. But yet look what they are doing. Are you telling me that you are less capable than those kids who are risking their career, risking their school, risking everything they have to do that, to stand for the people of Gaza? Are you telling me that you are less capable than those? And again, I'm not asking each one to go to the university encampment, but all I'm saying is each one of us can do something at his or her level. At my level right now, so beyond what I'm doing now, trying to support them financially and whatnot, something as simple as, so we have University of Michigan, which is about an hour away from us. They have a beautiful encampment there. We just went, me and my wife and the kids, we went there, we took some candies and whatnot. We went there and we just went there, just shook hands with them, hugged them, cried with them, spoke with them, encouraged them. We spent 2-3 hours just talking with them. And honestly, it meant the world to them. So you cannot tell me that there's nothing you can do at some level, even if it is as simple as talking to your co-workers, non-Muslim co-workers about Gaza. If each one of us, we Muslims here, what we are like, we keep saying we are only 1% or 2%. Well, regardless, even if we are 1%, if we are 1 million Muslim in America, if each Muslim talk to 5 of his or her non-Muslims, co-workers or classmates every day, each day pick up 5 people, and just, even if they hate you, even if they disagree with you, just sit down with them and say, hey, listen, we need to talk about Gaza. We need to talk about what's going on there. Force them to listen to you, even if they dislike it. Who cares? Because the people of Gaza are suffering. So the least you can do is make inconvenient conversation for you. So if we all do that, and each day we pick up 5 different non-Muslim people or people who are not sympathizing with Gaza and talk with them, I think we can make a difference. So I think that's my message, and that's why I'm agreeing to talk to anyone like yourself or anyone. I cannot stand the concept of mutalab id nashi. There's nothing we can do. Yes, you could. there is something each one of us can do beyond the basic three, which is dua, donations, some kind of political activism.
Barakallah feek, Dr. Bara Zuhaili, thank you so much for taking the time to being with us today, and Barakallah feek for everything that you've done. And for all of our listeners out there, let's take this message to heart. And, for anyone else out there that has a podcast with a platform out there, bring Dr. Bara on. I think the message that he's giving needs to be heard across the world and across the United States. Barakallah feekum for everyone being with us today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ya Rabbi ya Kareem, bring peace to those hearts that are suffering in Gaza and alleviate from them all harm. Dr. Bara, I'll see you bi'idhnillahi ta'ala soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Allah, thank you so much.